follow the negative. I sat in church one Sabbath day. The members talked a lot and showed as little reverence as any worldly crowd. Again, I sat in that same church, but all was quiet now, for in the casket up in front lay one with pallid brow. And then I thought, how strange it is that we so oft accord more reverence to a man that's dead than to our living Lord. If we could see with mortal eye bright angels there each day, our words would cease, then all would hear what Jesus had to say. It has been said that fools rush in where angels fear to tread. We say we come to worship God, but visit friends instead. Oh, why not show more reverence in this God's house of prayer and try to act as Christians should when we assemble there? We have kind of negative thoughts sometimes about the way how friendly people are in the church auditorium, but we do like to have a lot of friendliness in the entrance and in the downstairs. But sometimes it gets pretty noisy, and that's not so good. Reading our own obituary. For by the grace given to me, I bid every one among you not to think of himself more highly than he ought to think, but to think with sober judgment. Over in Sweden one morning, late in the 1880s, that's a long time ago, a fellow awoke from his sleep to find himself dead. Well, not really dead. It was just that the newspapers had gotten him confused with his brother, and when they printed the obituary, they printed his by mistake. Sorry about that. Imagine reading your own obituary. Talk about a shocking experience. It was a really shocking experience for this particular fellow. For the first time in his life, or death as it appeared, he saw himself as others saw him. It seems that the reporter, in writing the obituary, referred to him as the Dynamite King. You see, this man, who had supposedly died, had spent his entire life in the field of explosives. He had discovered dynamite, blasting gelatin, and ballistite, along with detonators for explosives. In the process, he had grown extremely rich. And now, with the world thinking that he was dead, he didn't like what he was being remembered for. This fellow didn't like the idea of being remembered as the Dynamite King. To him, the nickname implied something that he thought was destructive. So, at that very moment, he set about to correct the situation. He took his money and put it into a trust fund to promote awards for people who had contributed the most good in particular areas of man's concern, in physics, chemistry, physiology, medicine, literature, and peace. The winner of the award in each area annually receives from $30,000 to $50,000 for his efforts. You know, I guess many of us would change a few things if we knew that the world would remember us for. Most of us are like the fellow mentioned above. We are of the opinion that when we die, people will pay tribute to us for our great gains or our hard work. A lot of us would be just as surprised as he was if we could read our obituary, if we could see what we would be remembered for. One of the real mistakes we humans habitually make is that of thinking more highly of ourselves than we ought to think. A little bow-legged Jew had something to say about that a few hundred years ago. He said we should think of others in sober judgment. When we knew what we knew was that many times we drink until we are drunk with our own pride, selfishness, and ego. What am I doing that I should be remembered for? If a lot of us would spend the next 10 minutes answering that question in sober judgment, it could bring about just as tremendous a change in our lives as it brought about in the life of the gentleman mentioned herein. He changed for the good. A lot of us need to do that also. If you are wondering about who the man was, his name was Alfred Bernard Nobel. If you've never heard of him, you may have heard of the Nobel Prize. Those are the awards he established as a direct result of reading his own obituary. He didn't want them to remember that he was about the dynamite. Okay, if God went on strike. It's just a good thing God above has never gone on strike, because he wasn't treated fair for things he didn't like. If he had ever once sat down and said, "That's it, I'm through. I've had enough of what's on earth, so this is what I'll do. I'll give my orders to the sun, cut off that heat supply, and to the moon, give no more light, and run the oceans dry. Then just to really make it tough and put the pressure on, turn off the air and oxygen till every breath is gone." Do you know he'd be justified if fairness was the game? For no one has been more abused or treated with disdain than God, and yet he carries on, supplying you and me with all the favors and his grace and everything for free. Men say they want a better deal, and so go on strike they go. But what a deal we've given God, to whom everything we owe. We don't care whom we hurt or harm to gain the things we like. But when a mess we'd all be in if God should go on strike. Author unknown. God bless you as you make a name for yourself.